Well, hello there, and welcome to another edition of Warbird Wednesday. My name is Fred Bell. I am the vice chairman of the Palm Springs Air Museum. I am here with my troglodyte assistant today, Greg Kenny, and we are continuing to go down Bomber Lane. Now, Greg, I am back from vacation. I am energized. I am slightly tanned. I am ready to go. I've been washed, fluffed, and folded. I am ready to go. Are you excited about that? Greg is like, oh yeah, today we're going to be talking about the B-1B, the Lancer. And I always have to think about that because of the B-1A. There's a story behind the B-1A that I'll tell you about here in a second. But my fantastic supercalifragilistic assistant, Greg Kenny, has themed it once again today. If you'll notice, the hat I'm wearing, the name for the B-1B is the bone. Get it? B1 bone. I get it. You know, it took me a while to. Who says I'm quick on the uptake, right? But I eventually got it. But obviously, B1 bone. So he did a bone hat. This to me now, it looks like he was talking Oingo Boingo. I'm going to date myself with it. If you're east of the Mississippi, you have no idea who Oingo Boingo was, but I do, good West Coast band. And then, of course, to me, it reminded me of Live and Let Die, that character in Live and Let Die. So, but it has bones all over it. We're going to toss that and give it, oh, nice catch by the Kenny. So we're going to get into the B-1B, the Lancer. Now, the Lancer is part of 3 bombers. I'll go ahead and throw up a plan view. Now, this one's cool in that it is articulated. We spare no expense in our demonstrator aircraft. The B-1B is part of our current arsenal with B-52s and the B-2, the 3 bombers in there. Now, the B-1 will theoretically be gone from the inventory by 2036. It has an interesting history in that it first flew in 1974. It was introduced in 1986. There are 4 B-1As built and 100 B-1Bs. They've been slowly attriting out of the inventory. Supposedly this year, the Air Force announced that they were going to try to get themselves down to 45 of these in inventory. They were going to put 4 in that. I think, and you AMARC folks will be better at this, the Boneyard folks than I am. Boneyard, geez, where am I going with this? That they're going to keep 4 of them in Type 1000 storage, which is essentially ready reserve storage, and then the rest of them will go into the fleet for parts. At that point, they should be replaced by the B-21 by the Raider, which is the new stealth bomber, and that should replace them. Now, this aircraft came out of a study called the SLAB study. It was the Subsonic Low Altitude Bomber program in the 1960s, and that was to replace the B-58, the Hustler. Now, the challenge that the Hustler had was that it was originally designed as a very fast, high-altitude bomber. Go back and look at the segment. We can tell you more about it. What ended up happening, SAMs pushed it down low, and it did not do well down at low because the fuel consumption was just ridiculous, and they couldn't get it up to speed. The play on this aircraft was that they were going to try to get the airplane down low at about 0.96 Mach, or right under the speed of sound. They didn't quite get there, and I'll tell you about that in a second as to why they didn't get there. But that was the idea, was to get it just below supersonic. What happened with this airplane? Well, there were a couple of things swirling around as it went through development. One of them was airplane we're going to talk about was the F-111, another variable wing aircraft. F-111 was moving around in there. The Air Force simply felt that the F-111 wasn't big enough for what they needed as far as a bomb truck. So they were messing around with the concept after they decided that the F-111 just wasn't the end-all be-all, where they could get a bomber that could do about Mach 1.5 at altitude, let's say 40,000 feet, just for conversation's sake, and they could get very fast down low. Now, the challenge with very fast down low is the keeping the airplane out of the terrain. You got to remember, the airplane's flying low. It's flying low because it's trying to fly underneath the arc of SAM missiles. We just saw Top Gun. You saw them there in that ravine, and the missiles can't shoot down low. The idea is get down below those air defense. The other thing is an airplane moving that fast presents to a gunnery target. It's impossible. There's no way you'll be able to get, unless you're firing and the airplane flies through the firing pattern of the gun, there's no way you're going to get a bead on an airplane going that fast. So the idea was to get it down low. Well, what they did is they came up with a new avionics suite in the nose of the airplane. There's an IBM computer up there, the same computer that was in the space shuttle, I might add, which is about the size of a pocket calculator today. You know, your phone has more computing power. And then they came up with a bunch of sensors in the front of the airplane, and the aircraft kind of had a terrain following radar in it where it could avoid terrain. And so that was one of the key components of this airplane flying down low. Now, it was designed initially as a nuclear strike aircraft, and the Soviets did not take kindly when this airplane was originally discussed, because this, in the Cold War, could be conceived by the Soviets as a first strike airplane. In other words, you're going to come in very fast with nuclear weapons, and you're going to take me out before I can deal with you, right? So this caused a little bit of a concern, along with Pershing missile deployments in Western Europe because of the short flight time to the Soviet Union at that time. But one thing that really was a stick in the mud on this airplane was, to its further development, was the AGM-86 cruise missile. Had a very low terrain following flight envelope, was highly accurate, and at the time of the Carter administration in the late 70s, there were a lot of opponents of this airplane saying this build cost in this airplane was about $40 million at the time, which seems cheap, but at that time that's a lot of money. And the idea was that people were saying, just don't do it. The cruise missile, why put men in harm's way when you can essentially fire cruise missiles? And with cruise missiles with an atomic weapon, almost counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, right? I mean, you have to be totally accurate with atomic weapons, but they were opposed to it. So Carter decided to kill the program in favor of the AGM-86, but he did one thing, Greg, at that time that he's never really been given credit for. You know what that was? He signed the legislation, or caused to happen, the Advanced Technology Bomber, which became the B-2. Because you have to think about stealth technology at this time was also coming down the pipe. They're right about that same time. Stealth flew, in the early 80s, but you have Have Blue and those other aircraft being proposed at that time and starting to gel together. So what ended up happening was the program was killed. Then you had the Iran hostage crisis, and then what happened? Ronald Reagan came into office. Ronald Reagan came into office partially on a peace through strength, and he vowed to rebuild our military, because there were some people that viewed that there was a big malaise in our military after the Vietnam War. Whether that's true or not, we're not going to debate that. But people felt that our military had declined, and one of the things that was going to solve that was more ships, more airplanes, more everything. So the B-1 came back. Now, there's a little story about this, Greg. My mom and everybody around me really fed my aviation habit. And one of the things I got to do at the Rockwell plant when I was a kid was I got to sit in the cockpit of the B-1A when it was having its flight avionics loaded in it. I didn't know at that time to look at the serial number on the tail. You're a kid, you're just really excited about being in a bomber, in a new bomber, but it was in the factory, and they actually got me up in the cockpit, which was really cool. And I had people around me that would feed my aviation fixation even at that point. And so I actually got to sit in a B-1A. Now, the B-1A flight test program went pretty good. One of the things that happened, though, was they had a mishap with one of the airplanes. And at that, the way the airplane was designed, and we've talked about this before, is these capsules.
As always with United States military aircraft, the greatest consideration was placed on the service's most indispensable asset. The preservation of aircrew was a major priority. And with the B-1 project, it would prove a substantial challenge. Rockwell's engineers tackled the problem of crew survivability from a stricken plane in exactly the same way General Dynamics had with the F-111 crew capsule. But for the B-1, with a crew of 4, it would have to be much larger, and tolerances would be greater. There was always concern about the effects on aircrew, not only from the force of ejection, but more importantly, from the impact of landing. The F-111's capsule had worked well, but at this scale and at a weight of 9,000 pounds, the problems were multiplied. There was a real danger of spinal damage to crews on impact, so rapid action airbags were developed to cushion the effect of the module as it hit the ground.
And in the mishap, the crew decided to abandon the aircraft, and they did. And when the capsule hit the ground, there were supposed to be like these airbags to deploy, and that didn't happen. And the airbag didn't deploy, and I believe one of the crew was killed in that accident because of the airbag not deploying. It was basically, you know, running a car at 100 miles an hour into a slab of concrete, and you got these guys inside this capsule. It wasn't a good outcome. So one of the redesigns that happened on this airplane was they redesigned some of the inlets and some of the vanes on the inlets. And the reason for that, some of it was airflow, some of it was radar. There's a radar cross-section of the airplane. This aircraft has a radar cross-section that is 1/50th of a B-52. There's a very low radar cross-section, but it was not designed to be super stealthy. They understood radar reflection at that time. The other thing was to give it better airflow at low altitude and allow it to breathe a little bit better. That brought the Mach down, the high speed at low altitude, down from a design target of 0.96 to 0.92 Mach. So it slowed the airplane down a little bit, but it improved its overall performance. Now, if you were a Rockwell employee, Rockwell North American, and then they got rid of the North American, you are going to be my salute today, because this aircraft, not only did it, was it, I think, a good nuclear deterrent at the time. I remember at the time I was totally for this, you know, build them, build 1 billion of them, let's build all of them. But it has really done well. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the maintenance issues with the airplane, but it has really done well going forward, and it's been a versatile weapon system. And at the time, you know, when you design things, you don't know whether it's kind of like we just talked about the B-52. Who knew the airplane's going to be flying when it's 100 years old? This airplane, I think, although the Air Force, as I said, has talked about retiring at 2036, I don't think that's going to happen. None of these programs hit their marks. I think it's going to continue to be flying, maybe in smaller numbers. There is no question that it kept us out of a hot war with the Soviets. So if you were a Rockwell North American employee at that time, you worked on this program, I'm going to salute you, and I'm going to do that with oh so good butterscotch root beer. Not sure what this has to do with the bone. Greg is shaking his head. Let's see. 170 calories. These things are all like in that. It must be whatever they put in it. There's just no way around getting it lower than that. There's no like pure cane sugar thing on this, so they're not part of the pure cane sugar mafia. Go ahead and pop it. I heard a fizz, and it is cold. And look at that, Greg. Yeah, Greg is like, yes, it actually frothed over a little bit, so it's fresh. So if you were at Rockwell, North American at that time, thank you for your work on this airplane. Thank you what you did for the security of our country. I salute you. Oh man, real heavy finish, like sickly sweet finish. The obligatory second sip. If you like butterscotch, I'm not going to say that's bad. It's not as nasty as I've said some of the things you've served me, but it's just too sweet for my taste. But it's not terrible. So thank you to the folks at Oh So Good. I don't think I'll get any botulism from this one, at least. So we talked about the versatility of the platform, and the reality of this platform is we didn't know at the time that we were going to get pulled into all these brush fire wars. And so with the Gulf War and Syria and Afghanistan and all the places that we've had to go fight, which has required more equipment to support ground troops. And suddenly, this thing that really went from being a low-level strategic bomber is now loitering over battlefield, and it's dropping precision weapons. That happened with the Block D upgrade to the airplane. With the Block D upgrade, that gave the aircraft the ability to drop a lot of the different precision weapons that were now part of the inventory that hadn't been conceived or developed when the airplane came in initially. So it could now, in Syria or Afghanistan, loiter and then drop these bombs. There were many times, I think 30 times over Afghanistan, where the aircraft went Winchester, which basically ran out of precision weapons. They had no more weapons to drop, and they would come back completely empty. So it turned into a very, very nice ground support airplane. There was an R version, a B-1R version proposed that would have had air-to-air missiles installed on it because they had kicked around a lot of times with more external stores. And this thing handles, I mean, it will handle like a fighter. It is a huge aircraft, but it is amazing how much power you can get out of this airplane. And what they had done is they had talked about putting air-to-air missiles on it. So basically it could fly in to enemy territory, not only carry bombs, but also defend itself. So they ended up kicking that around. That was in 2004. They never did it. As I said, in 2021 of this year, they have talked about now going down to that number of 45. And I think you're going to see now the drawdown of the airplane. The airplane has had, because of the technology, some issues with its engines, some ground fires, and some maintenance issues. And they've had to redesign the cockpit when they did the B-1B. So these are individual ejections out of the cockpit, no longer having the capsule, and they've had some trouble there, believe it or not. The other thing, the last thing, is the variable wing. This will probably be the last aircraft that I can think of, Greg, that is in the fleet that has a variable wing. And what really everybody fell in love with, from the F-111, the F-14, this aircraft, everybody loved the variable wing. What everybody figured out was the maintenance involved in this wing is just too much. And that was what ultimately I think is another reason that led to the demise of the airplane, why the airplane won't be going on. There's just too much maintenance associated with the aircraft. So we will see in 2036 if the B-21 actually replaces the aircraft and it actually stands down. My money is it's going to be around a little longer than that, but we'll see. Now, this is, in my book, one of the coolest shirts that we have. If you want, this is a Stan Stokes original. This is our Air Pirate shirt with the Gothic lettering. Of course, Greg chose it because of the bone. This is a great shirt. We sell a ton of these. You can go out to the website and pick one up, and you can be the coolest kid on your block to have one of these shirts. I think so. Now, we cannot do all this stuff. We're standing in the B-17 hangar, and you could see an exposed turret here. We can't do all this stuff without your donations. If you want to click on that link and give us a few shekels, we would appreciate it. If you came across us on YouTube, we would love to have you as a subscriber. If you know somebody that just likes long-form aviation videos with no fluff, that's us, wouldn't you say, Greg? Or are you the fluff? No, you're not. Okay, so we don't do anything but long-form aviation videos. We get right down to the nitty-gritty. And if you can get past the hat and the soda, we'd love to have you as a subscriber. My name is Fred Bell. I am the Vice Chairman of the Palm Springs Air Museum. Thanks so much. Have a great day.